Now, identity theft is probably something all of you are very aware of. It's basically when someone is using your personal information, your name in the U.S., your social security number, or credit card numbers, and all those other things that identify you, doing this without your permission in an attempt to commit fraud, or maybe even some other criminal action. Now, this could be done for a number of reasons. One, it could be done just as a way of getting your online identity to be able to impersonate you. Now, that could happen with cyberbullying, where somebody wants to make your life absolutely miserable in the public world. Again, that could be part of defamation, maybe even trying to make you appear to be this horrible person. It could be used for cyber attacks. You know, other things that identity theft could be used for is just to impersonate who you are if somebody were to, say, get involved in a criminal action. Now, in my experiences, and some of which, of course, as I told you about, was in the law enforcement arena, there have been a number of times when people who would lie about who they are, and then, of course, if they were able to perpetuate that lie, then get charged with a crime, never show up to court. Next thing you know, you're the one that's going to jail because of identity theft. And so it's more than just financial, and that's what's important to understand. That's kind of what we seem to focus on. The companies that are in business now to protect you from identity theft, that's what they're really focusing on. But it goes beyond the financial part. That's why I wanted to make sure you understood that it could be about your identity, your social status, saying things that are not true about you. All of these are reasons why somebody might choose to go through identity theft. Now, there are other things, of course, that would happen with identity theft. Once somebody has taken your identity, they could use it for basic things like credit card fraud, ordering a new credit card in your name, and then spending up the limit, and of course, you're the one responsible for paying it back. Bank account fraud, lots of stories you can read if you just search for identity theft to see how people's accounts have just been completely drained. Fortunately, banks are doing a better job at protecting you with the way in which you log in, being able to, depending on the bank, to be able to limit your liability. They might be using your identity to purchase new vehicles, maybe to file fraudulent tax returns, maybe just to get employed when they're not legally in the country, to be able to get that employment in your name. Or, as I said, again, getting caught in crimes or criminal activity and using your name, which ends up with the warrants being issued in your name. That's not a great way to spend your day, I'm sure. All right, so how does it happen? Well, one of the easy ways is dumpster diving. You know, all of those mail that you get, the pre-approved credit card offers, or even bank statements, if they're not being sent to you electronically anymore, are usually just thrown away by the majority of us. Not very many of us actually have shredding machines to shred that stuff before it goes out. It could be shoulder surfing. Again, something they might do just by watching what you type in. As I've said so many times before, capturing pictures of or video of what you're doing with their cell phones. It could be a part of a subterfuge where, as I've talked about before, about them sending you websites that you might sign up for and present information thinking you're going to win a prize, or that you've gone to a site that looks like some shopping place that you always go to, and it's not. But they're getting your identity information. You know, if you think about it, once I have your username and password, I can sign on to other sites as you, because most of us, unfortunately, don't use different passwords for different sites. And then look at your account information and then be able to get information such as credit card numbers or getting your address, or all of the information that helps me to be able to pretend to be you. They could also use it for the actual theft of property. Theft from your home, from, you know, thinking of if they go to your home, they steal things and you've left a wallet or a checkbook, they could take that information and use that to be able to impersonate you. If you lost a laptop or some other handheld electronic device, an iPad or some sort of droid machine that has your personal information. For that matter, if you're not locking your cell phones, a person can steal that and get a lot of information about you, because in today's smartphone technology, a lot of our personal information is stored through the apps of the websites that we visit. And again, the same thing with the personal devices, what we used to call PDAs, but now I guess we have different names for them, but the handheld devices that contain, again, our personal information. All of these are sources of where a person can get that information from you. And they don't even have to keep it that long. They might just use it while maybe you walk away from a table during lunch, or if you just leave it at your office and it's somebody walking through. You know, I remember a time when I was working with a hospital in Pennsylvania. I'll leave it at that. And they had a problem with their cleaning crew. One of the people in their cleaning crew, being a foreign national, having gone through to the different kiosks, or I guess we call them cubicles, and loading up malware on all of their machines during the night so that he could get their information from them as they were working during the daytime. And nobody thought anything about it because they just thought he was doing a really good job at cleaning those cubicle areas, when in fact he was just using a USB drive, uploading his own malware, and stealing their information. Now, other things that could happen: double swiping of a credit card. I've made mention already, and I hope the restaurant industry doesn't look badly at me when I talk about the fact that people who you're handing your credit cards to could be hopefully swiping it to pay your bill, could swipe it again to be able to capture that number, or even just write the information down and use it at a later time. They have everything they need if you think about it. They have the name, they have the credit card number, they have the 3 or 4-digit number on the back. They have virtually everything they need to be able to impersonate you or use that card. And again, they might just be using you as a source of information by asking you questions. You know, a couple of U.S. elections in the past, there was a vice presidential candidate whose Yahoo email was hacked. How was that done? They used that person's information, stories that they've published, information off of Facebook, to be able to hack the account. How did they do it? Well, they just simply clicked on a link that said, "Oh, I forgot my password." And then said, "Okay, well, let's ask you some security questions, like what city did you grow up in, what street, what's the name of your dog?" And so they were able to answer that information using that person and their own words as a source of information to change the password, and then to be able to get all of the emails. Good news was that person was caught. So, other things that might happen to you if you don't think about this. If I know that you're getting your bills at your address, what's to stop me from going to the post office and putting in an address change notification and then having your mail redirected to me, and now I own all of the personal information about you, and it's just being hand delivered to me? Skimming is another thing we have to worry about, where people are actually putting extra devices on something like an ATM machine to read the credit card number as they're inserting the card into the ATM machine, thinking nothing about it, and then of course come back at a later day or later time, take that skimming device off, download that information, and then of course I have not only all of your information, but potentially even PIN numbers that you've used. I know there's been a couple of examples that we used to see in some of the hacking classes, where the instructors would take students out to some of the older gas stations that converted their gas pumps from being, no credit cards to a credit card, but the original wiring is not there. In other words, they didn't have a hard cable that would go from the pumps to some server on the inside of the gas station, so they're using Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, it was using unencrypted Wi-Fi. And so they were showing students how you could just sit there in the parking lot, capture the Wi-Fi information, and not only were you getting the credit cards, but you were getting the PIN numbers that were being sent, all in clear text. So in a way, that's a kind of skimming, but all of these are ways in which we can see somebody stealing our information. Now, how do you defend yourself? Well, there are a number of ways that you can get online protection through your creditors. Now, there's a growing trend of tools from banks and other companies that are designed to defend you from the theft. Things like being able to log in and set up a certain number of alerts. I know with my bank that I use, I have almost every alert turned on. Any deduction, any ATM charge, available balances, daily balances, checks going through, all are sent to me within a relatively short time of those transactions. And then I can look at those and say, yeah, those are good or those are bad. I know that we have different ways of trying to help verify that you are connected to the bank besides just the use of certificates, which is having some online IDs that many times they just have like a picture that shows up for you, that if it's not one you picked, is just a verification that says, hey, this is not the legitimate site. They couldn't figure out some of the extra information that you needed to be able to see when you log in. So at least you can't be a victim of phishing very easily. Of course, other ways to defend yourself would be in getting rid properly of your confidential mail or pre-approved credit offers. Now, getting rid of it doesn't mean just throwing it in the garbage. It also doesn't mean ripping it up by hand, but actually using a device to shred that mail, and there's a variety of different types of shredders. You might have seen a growing business now for corporations having really large semis come in where they will take all of their paper goods, throw it in this actual semi that shreds the documents right then and there before it drives off, and then can properly dispose of that later on. All of that was designed not to get rid of evidence, of course. We see that in a lot of movies, I guess, but in a way of making sure that the people that want to go dumpster diving would have an almost impossible time at piecing all that information back together to learn about that company or to learn about yourself. Also remember, beware of who you're talking to on the phone. I'm sure I've already made mention of the fact that it's very easy to fake your caller ID. Some of you might actually be excited and think of this as a great prank. You know, let's say call somebody and use a different caller ID. I suppose that's a nice way of using it, but it's not that difficult. If you think about it, the service is basically you're making the phone call and you're presenting your number that you're dialing from. And in today's technology, with voice over IP especially, we can change that number because it doesn't change the routing of the number we're calling, just what's displayed on their phone. And so they might just actually be calling you with a fake caller ID, trying to make it look like they're from some financial institution or store or something else, and trying to convince you to give them information over the phone. Again, verify it. If you don't know them personally, call them back. That's the nice thing, at least at this point. We don't have a way, at least not very easily, to redirect or reroute a phone call back to an actual hacker from the number you're trying to call. Other ways to defend yourself, ways to reduce your risk, or risk mitigation as we call it, is don't have a single point of theft. Now, you see, I try to use a little network term, a single point of failure. In other words, don't have your purse or wallet contain every credit card you have in the same location, because if you lose that one item, you've lost all of it. So now this does sound a little bit annoying, and it's sad that unfortunately, if you really want to protect yourself, that we have to go through a little bit of this hassle. But just don't take every credit card you have with you. Take the ones you need as you're going out. Or don't carry at least all of those credit cards in the same location. So again, you don't have that single point where one theft could, or even just one loss, can leave you vulnerable. Verify your credit reports. There's a number of online methods to be able to look at your credit reports. There's a number of services that will constantly monitor your credit reports, some for free, some for a charge. But the idea is that you can at least look to see if anybody's applying for credit. And of course, there are a lot of companies that are actually going to monitor your credit, monitor your bank accounts continually to be able to help protect you from identity theft. Those services, of course, are not free, and it's up to you whether you choose to use something like that, but they can be instrumental in protecting you from before anything happens. Another way to protect yourself is use different passwords for all of your accounts. Now, I got to tell you, that can be burdensome, but I actually do. I have a series of about 5 passwords, so I'm not being completely fair to my statement. I may have 10 or 15 different places I log in, and I'll spread my 5 passwords over those different places, but at least I know that if somebody gets my one password, that maybe at most 3 of my accounts are going to be at risk for being attacked, where the others are safe because it is different. Now, this can be difficult, but it is really worth the effort, and I found that over time, you just kind of get used to this. And by the way, I constantly change my passwords. Well, constantly. Every few months, I'm changing the passwords that I use for different accounts so that I am, again, trying to keep enough variety so that I don't have a single point of theft. Now, hopefully, you won't write all these passwords down and keep them in your wallet for all the different websites where your credit cards are, because again, that just violates that idea of a single point of failure. But the idea is to make it more difficult for somebody who steals at least one password from getting everything you have. Another thing you should look at for defending yourself is don't carry your Social Security card. In today's world, we really don't need to have our Social Security card with us. Most of you probably have that number memorized. Another thing that's very important, and this has changed so much over the last couple of decades, don't use your Social Security number for identification. Now I realize I'm talking mostly for those of you who are in the United States, but the idea here is that when you think about your Social Security number in the old days, and I say old days, when I was a young adult, my driver's license number was my Social Security number. If I wanted to get cable TV, I had to identify myself with a Social Security number. If I wanted to get power, if I wanted to get gas, again, they all wanted my Social Security number. In today's world, some of those companies might still require, or not require, but ask for your Social Security number. but instead I give them my driver's license number. And that driver's license number, at least in the state that I live in, is no longer allowed to be a Social Security number because of the problem of identity theft. And so now we're saying, hey, look, the SSN was supposed to be specifically for federal services, never designed to be an identification. And so a lot of these companies, a lot of states have passed laws that said you can't use the SSN anymore for that identifying information, which is great now. So all I have to do is worry about coming up with another identifier. And like I said, a driver's license number also seems to work. The reason that to me is a little more important is because my driver's license number is not going to be quite sufficient for somebody to get new credit in my name, where the SSN seems to almost always be what we use for credit reporting or for applying for credit. Remember, just be aware. Check your surroundings. Is somebody taking a picture of you as you use your credit card? Are you covering the number on your credit card? Because all you need is a magnetic stripe. So be aware of people who might be shoulder surfing, people who might be eavesdropping on your conversations. Now, there are different schools of thought that say you should sign each of your credit cards. Now, here's the school of thoughts, and I'm not going to come down on either side of this, but just hoping that I'm going to raise your awareness. If I sign my credit card, most of the places I go always look at the back of the credit card, and if it looks signed, they just swipe the card. Now, that to me, I don't like because I want them to ask me for ID. I personally don't sign my credit cards, hoping that they would be nice enough to say, hey, do you have your identification with you? And I can say, yes, here I am. Some people might actually put on the back CID, so that we know that if somebody steals your card and they turn it over and now they have to ask for the ID, that they're at least verifying that it is the owner of the credit card. But then again, some people will also tell you that your limit of liability with most credit card companies is somewhere between $25 and $50. So if even somebody does steal it and start swiping it, that you're not out that much money. Personally, I could use $50. I don't need to pay it off as a fraudulent charge. So I'll leave that as just an awareness of you looking at the way or the rules of your credit card company and making a decision what might be best for you. But just make sure that you have a decision because you've thought about it. Again, that's the awareness. Also, follow up on late transactions. Now, what does that mean with late transactions? In other words, if I'm expecting a new card in the mail because mine's about to expire, and I haven't gotten my card, and I thought by now I should have, call them and see, hey, has it been mailed? Has it been used? Because remember, I said people might put in a change of address notification to the post office, and maybe they've got your new card and you don't have it anymore. So you want to follow up on those to see why something hasn't come through, why you haven't received mail that you thought you were supposed to, just to make sure that you're being on top of transactions rather than just thinking, oh, maybe it's lost, maybe it's delayed, but actually being a little more forward thinking and saying, I want to make sure that I'm safe. The other thing you should look at in defending yourself is making sure you're aware of any online credit card use. Now, is it safe? Yes, if you're prepared. And when we talk about end-to-end security, we'll talk about the entire idea of SSL encryption and the options that we have to make sure that your use of a credit card online is going to be safe, or at least relatively safe. Like I said, nothing's 100% secure, but I have a lot of faith in online transactions. You also, like I said before, need to look at the rules that come with your credit card so you know what your creditor is offering you for your protection should fraudulent use of your card occur.